you get into this like rentable, employable agent space, right? You're probably already using them. It's probably something to make this even in this podcast, but everybody's job is different. And these things are popping up left and right all the time. So as we get into applying for jobs, I saw a LinkedIn post the other day that was open to a human as well as an AI agent. Like this is a thing that AI agents are supposed to do. So I don't care if a human comes and solves it for me, and AI agents comes and solves it for me, but this job's out there. I think that's going to continue. And like everyone's going to become a manager, basically. Like you're going to become a manager of agents or tools, and your impact's going to grow. And a dystopian mind might go, oh, what happens to all the jobs? It's just going to just think of it in an optimistic way of like abundance of productivity happens. Everybody's a manager. And then I'm interested in how that seeps into the big companies that we just talked about.
Building great experiences. Revolutionize your business. Building great experiences. Innovative strategies. Building great experiences. Elevate for your customers. Like, comment, and subscribe.
Hey folks, this is Drew with another episode of the Building Great Experiences podcast. Today I've got a friend of mine named Jake Heberlie. He is the Chief Experience Officer for Rentvine. We've known each other for probably 4 or 5 years. We worked together in a prior employer. He ran a practice of awesome humans in St. Louis, which is where he's located, me in Charlotte. And we've jammed a lot over the years on solving client problems, also just like building teams and thinking through strategy. But today we're going to be talking about future customer experience and user experience. What does it look like? Where do we think it's going? So it should make for an awesome conversation. But Jake, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me, Drew. Super stoked.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I kind of teed you up a little bit, but I'd love for you to share your origin story with the audience. Like where'd you get started? How'd you get into this industry, and kind of what you're doing now?
Yeah, I was trying to think of do this like chronologically or reverse, but I love the origin story. That's the way I love to like prompt things when I meet people, is like, tell me your superhero origin story. So not to go all the way back, but like there's something, and I think we share in like a kernel of DNA of like making things and getting them out into the world. I think that's how I got into a lot of this stuff. Art school kid, like just like to chase digital agencies and whatever who was making kind of weird creative things. Followed that into sort of like backed into consulting whenever it got to be a little bit more like less about awards and pretty and more about like, how can we help someone? And to do that, you have to talk to people and you have to facilitate things. And so I spent some time at a company called Explain, born out of St. Louis. Great company, lots of awesome illustrators and designers making things. And then bounced around to a couple digital agencies, went into financial services, and I was a director of user experience and kind of started a like corporate design transformation back when those were like in vogue. So shout out to Edward Jones people who are still on that journey. It's a long and crazy one. I'd love to talk more about those like kind of design transformations and stuff. And then after that is whenever I kind of got into the consulting game, and yeah, about 6 years of building a professional services practice around design and customer and experience and all these things. And I mean, I'm sure you loved it too. Like the professional services things gives you so much variety. So for anyone who is curious and likes to make things and move fast, like it's a good place to jump in and swim, because you can get so much exposure to so many industries and learn a ton. And then I recently got off that train about a year ago, jumped into Rentvine. It's like a SaaS product. It's in property management. So we're property management software, and we aspire to deliver the experience that property managers deserve. So that's not just property managers, but the whole ecosystem of owners and vendors and residents, applicants. Like this whole ecosystem has to hum and get along with each other. And so we're using design for that. I've been at that about a year.
Awesome, man. Yeah. Well, it's funny. I was in St. Louis like in December, and I visited before, maybe like 12, 15, 20 years ago. And St. Louis is a cool spot, man. Like you guys got some good stuff going. You got some like, I don't know, good vibe, and lots of companies that are being born there. I was visiting because Gateway X, which is like portfolio of companies based out of that area, they had an accelerator I was a part of. And Jesse Puggi is the kind of like founder. He's a St. Louis guy. I know you guys got like Nelly. I'm trying to think of other St. Louis folks. But
Yeah,
yeah,
we're trying, man. Underdog story. I feel some camaraderie with like cities like Detroit and other folks who kind of like went through this like expansion and contraction of like west expansion to the suburbs and stuff. But there's a lot going on like in the riverfront and in the community spaces that we have. Yeah, it's a little thing we're nurturing, and thanks for helping to kind of pollinate there from Charlotte.
yeah, man. No, Charlotte is same. Like we're kind of like mid-market, but like flourishing. I've been here 21 years now, which is kind of wild to say out loud. And yeah, like I was just at a startup event yesterday, and we hosted another startup event a week and a half ago. So it's just cool. It's cool to see. I think now because everything is, you can work from anywhere, right? People are much more interested in living and working in places where they can raise families or just have a better quality of life or whatever. So a lot of these like formerly known as flyover states are starting to see like a surge of tech talent and design talent, people like us who kind of do what we do. But it's a good segue. So I would love to hear your thoughts. I know it's a big topic, but
Yeah.
kind of in that vein of like the future of customer experience, the future of work, right? Like there's a lot of really great talent moving to places like St. Louis and Charlotte who are interested in reimagining, reinventing experiences. So where do you see it going? What are some of the themes you're seeing now at Rentvine, but also previously in your other roles?
Yeah. I love this question. I get like super psyched. So I don't know if like Drew and I had a pre-call to kind of set this up. So I don't know if it's like a really good talent for you to like pull the thread about like you sent me these topics and I'm like, oh, this is so much on my mind. And I don't know if our definitions of like the umbrella of design and customer experience and all these things, I'm gonna say like those words not as important. I'm not interested in defining those things. But to start, like I love to study this like design maturity thing inside of companies or just like the history of it all, because I feel like it's something that's not like a well understood, documented industry. So if it's cool, I might like kind of go back in time, look backwards first,
Yeah.
and like get us to the point we are now. So not that I'm like an expert on this at all, but just it's just something that I'm kind of passionate about. So like one thing is, and I talked about coming from agencies and stuff, is like there's so many people that have been doing this for so long, right? Like Jacob Nielsen talks about like this vocabulary inflation problem we have in UX or in design, and we kind of reinvent. That's why I said the words don't matter. It's like human computer interaction or human factors, and just kind of like we iterate and we want to reinvent because we want to make it feel new. But there's also a lot of like influence from industrial design or architecture. Like whenever I meet people from those worlds, they feel like kindred spirits. So like all these kind of things coming together. And I talked a little bit about like this big promise design had, and I was kind of part of this enterprise design transformation thing. And then like design like really had its moment, right? Like IBM set up this studio in Austin, like poured $100 million into it. And all these big companies were trying to like do this, be Apple, right? So how do we do that? How do we get that? How do we manufacture that? There was like this overwhelming body of evidence that was saying design, good for business, lots of ROI there. What happens? I'm trying, like, this is still part of the preamble, but like to prepare for that, I feel like we saw all these boot camps spring up, and you probably know people and you've probably seen resumes. I feel so sorry for these people, but they like, we were manufacturing junior level designers, and they were promised something that I don't think was real in the world, or they found out, or the world changed on them as they like entered the workforce, and that this is designed as like this really methodical thing, and it's going to be really easy, and you're not going to have to deal with any other people with other perspectives, and just like kind of buzzsaw. I saw a lot of these people run into that, and to just be in situations maybe they weren't. So shot clock runs out on design. Any kind of like down market is like if you're the head of the center of innovation, that's a cost center. I'd be like worried whenever that happens. So yeah, that leads us to like the FANG layoffs and AI stuff, and like it gets us to this point. There was a period where like I feel like design was kind of being hawked, just like the new Six Sigma or like the new Agile manifesto, right? We're all going around there preaching, and it got a lot. We rode that wave. The wave was awesome. I don't think those times are coming back. But then there was like felt like a moment in time where there was like a business breakup, or like, hey, we're not getting what we invested here, or what we thought. I don't know. Before I go forward to like into the future or the now, like I'm curious if that rings true to you, if there's any like ways to enrich that story.
Yeah, no, dude, couldn't have said it better, man. It's been interesting to watch over the. I mean, I've been doing this for 16 years, and interesting to look back and say, okay, like there's been this wave, and like a lot of people have gotten on the wave, and then the wave didn't necessarily deliver on the promise in a lot of ways, right? And so a lot of business leaders and folks who kind of have, you know, to own the P&L are like, why am I paying for this thing? Why am I paying for people who are supposed to like make the experience better? And like now the experience is better, but I'm not making any more money. I'm not saving any money. Like, what's the point? And so I think, yeah, like there's a bit of a, like people got called to the mat and they couldn't back it up, right? Like they weren't able, they didn't have any points on the scoreboard.
Right.
You know, and so, to your point, I think the manufacturing of a lot of folks who came into it with this idea that like it's this very like methodical thing, and I just follow and execute this process, and I'll get results. And really, to me, the kind of essence of design is the process is like you have tools in your toolbox, and you're pulling out different tools for different types of problems. But you're not just pulling out the same tools in the same sequence every time, because you won't solve the problem. You know, you're not going to create value that way. And I think that's where a lot of the folks who went through the boot camps, a lot of folks who've gone through the like formal training, there's like, they lack the intuition and discernment to be able to decide, I'm going to like completely bypass this step of the process and do this other, I'm going to pull out this other tool. You know, like actually funny enough, like I was literally right before this meeting or this podcast, I was in a meeting with a client, and we had planned a workshop. So we had a Fig Jam board, and we were like, we had the board all set up, we show up at the meeting, and we're like getting ready to go through it. And like 5 minutes in, it was like, oh, we are not doing a Fig Jam board anymore. Like we are pivoting to like a different, because, you know, it's like different players came to the table with different expectations and, you know, whatever. And so we're like, all right, we're just adjusting and shifting on a dime. And a lot of design folks don't have that capability, right? They're like, well, no, we have to do the board because that's the thing that comes next in the process. And people are like, dude, I don't like, sorry.
This is good for job seekers to understand, because I think we're hiring right now, and that is the number one thing we kind of look for when we're looking through portfolios is like, does this artifact look like a step in a process that someone was like, empathy maps, check, see, got them here? Or is there enough like depth there, or did you skip it and have some other cool story that you decided to like, I didn't do that part. I didn't do journey maps because, or like over indexing on qualitative whenever obviously like you're doing information architecture, like you probably don't want to take like interview 6 people approach to like designing something that needs a lot of qualitative data, or quantitative data. So yeah, it's unfortunate because I really feel for those people who were like early, and I feel like that's kind of opportunities disappeared for them. So I'd love to like find a way to help them, but it does put us in a spot. So I think that's like a good segue into like the where are we now? We're in this space where like there was this breakup, or like really maybe an awakening and understanding of like there still are a lot of really great talent out there. And now I feel like we're in 2 spots. Like one of them is like this Gen AI weird future thing, and the other is this like probably more near term tension between design and product and who does what. So maybe I'll talk about that first. Is like I feel like we're in this space, and I'm seeing a lot of folks. I'm in this tug of war of like, well, all the design jobs went away. I'm basically doing a lot of product work. Should I be a product manager, product owner now? There are a lot of smart people talking about this kind of stuff. I mean, mostly in the comments, what I see are people wanting a perfect job description that prevents them from having any conflict. Like, I want design to be this, I want UX research to be this, and I don't want anyone to ever do my job. And I feel threatened, or I feel like they don't understand me or devalued. And that's an awful feeling. I've been there. I'm sure you've been there, Drew. But to me, that like that's a little bit of a mirage or like a false solution. It's usually a team dynamic problem, or like a high functioning teams problem, where it's like, if we're building silos of capabilities and they're all trying to like work across this one project, but they have different managers, like I'm just describing every big company in the world, you can solve the problem on like forcing those people into a room, building trust, throw the titles away and say, what are you good at? And I've got this and I've got this. And that's where like I've seen awesome high velocity teams. People feel productive. Even if I don't get to do the UX research dream project, like I'm feeling important because I'm helping the team.
Yeah. I have this theory that, to kind of build on what you're saying, the whole like, it's not my job kind of attitude, or this is, I own this thing and like you need to kind of stay in your lane. I think with the way the world is headed, like all of that is going to completely get blown up, because you're going to have people who are able to do a lot of things that are using tools to be able to do it more more efficiently, more effectively. You're not going to have these like clean cut lines of like marketing and product and design and engineering and blah, 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 operations and sales. Like it's all going to start to bleed together and homogenize. And you're going to have people who are just like, can you deliver value, period? Like, it's not really about like the artifacts that you can create or the like, this is in my job description type of a thing. It's going to be much more, hey, we as a company are going this direction and we're delivering this value for our customers. And like, it's all hands on deck. We figure it out. And like, don't sort of like have pride of ownership or have an ego about like, well, I have to do this piece of the equation, right?
Yeah, I think we're gonna be very aligned on like where the future is going here. So like that's the kind of like the tension, and a lot of these are big company problems. I think like if you're working at a small to mid size and you're like this accelerator like StealthX is, and you can kind of like pull on all the most modern tools, you've got high caliber talent using the best bleeding edge tools, you get an awesome output. And I think that is where it's going. And I'm specifically going to talk a little bit about like these vertical AI agent things, which flavor of the month, right? Like I'm willing to come out and talk about this in a way that like blockchain was out there, NFTs were out there, and you know that everybody had their moment in the sun. But I think something real's kind of happening here, given that like Y Combinator has talked about this, but there was an initial reaction that don't build any vertical agent. And vertical agent, I just mean, you know, something with specialized industry knowledge, you know, built to kind of cater to doing things. Don't invest in that because you'll just get eaten by the big models of the world. OpenAI or whomever is going to create everything. Well, fast forward like a year and like hundreds of companies exist making tens and hundreds of millions of dollars with these vertical AI agents. Why? Because we're a little bit lazy. Like I kind of just want to pay for my Netflix account. Like I would want to pay for this thing to like fix and make my life easier. So I think that was like really interesting. So I'm trying to play out, it seems similar to like kind of the tools you're talking about, like the bleeding edge AI tools. How can I already be super capable, like a high caliber talent, and then 10x that? Holy cow, what's that worth? So here's what I sort of like predict to start to happen is you get into this like rentable, employable agent space, right? You're probably already using them. It's probably something to make this even in this podcast, but everybody's job is different. And these things are popping up left and right all the time. So as we get into applying for jobs, I saw a LinkedIn post the other day that was open to a human as well as an AI agent. Like this is the thing that AI agents are supposed to do. So I don't care if a human comes and solves it for me and AI agents comes and solves it for me, but this job's out there. I think that's going to continue. And like everyone's going to become a manager, basically. Like you're going to become a manager of agents or tools and your impact's going to grow. And a dystopian mind might go, oh, what happens to all the jobs? It's just going to just think of it in an optimistic way of like abundance of productivity happens. Everybody's a manager. And then I'm interested in how that seeps into the big companies that we just talked about. So I think a lot of the small and mid-sized businesses, maybe you're working with some of these, Drew, maybe you work with like giant, you know, corporations, but there'll be less red tape. So I think the smaller companies are going to be more nimble. They're going to get more benefit from this type of model before the megacorps. But then what happens in the megacorps? So you're going to see the same pattern, I'm going to predict, as AWS, cloud services, as Salesforce, where you end up overspending on this stuff, or you end up with 12 instances, or like all this cannibalization of AI agents. And like we're subscribed to like, it's just like me and like all my Netflix and Disney Plus and whatever. Like I'm subscribed to too many things. How do I make it consolidated? How do I make it make sense? Where's the risk? So that, I mean, it's a kind of a sloppy world, but I could see us getting there. And eventually the one wild card is like some kind of big regulatory event that happens that like blows the whole thing up or makes it all illegal. So I don't know. That's sort of like the story arc that I'm envisioning happening.
Yeah, I think you're right on, man. The consolidation of stuff, like that's kind of like we kind of go through these waves where it's like the Wild West, all the cowboys are making new tools and technology. Everybody's sort of like, you know, loading up with their pistols and their rockets and their knives and stuff. And then you're like, now I've got a big giant bag of stuff that I'm having to lug around. And like, to your point, you're paying all this for it. And you're like, and then probably the big giant corporations are going to start to, at that point, be like, all right, let's just start buying all these things and forcing it into like one unified platform. And that's probably how the big guys will survive, you know, because they're they'll just like buy everybody or buy all the smaller players. I think there's probably, I love your comment on the everyone becomes a manager. Something I've been like pondering, and I don't really have a good perspective on this yet, is like, to your point, like junior talent, it's kind of a tough spot to be in. I've talked to a bunch of folks who are like early career, just out of college, and like they come to me and like, dude, what do I got to do to get a job? Like I don't even know where to start. And I'm like, honestly, just consume as much as you can about AI and just get further ahead than like people who have more experience than you. But like, that's all I can really give you right now, because I don't know. No one really knows. And like, the thing I've been wondering is like, to be a leader, to be someone who's able to look across multiple things and kind of connect the dots and orchestrate across those things, you have to have like, lived some life. You have to have kind of done some things and seen things, good, bad, ugly. And it gives you the perspective to be able to say, I can now kind of look across a lot more stuff. And it'll be interesting to see how early career talent kind of traverses that landscape, right? Of like, how do you go from, I just graduated from college, or or maybe I just got out of high school and I don't care about college. How do you move into a zone where you like know how to even think about leading, managing, orchestrating, coordinating, connecting dots? Like, it's got to be a really big hill to climb. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that piece.
Well, I mean, it's the same issue as abundance of folks who thought their career was going to go one way. And I had the same thoughts. I don't have any silver bullet answers here, but I had the same general answer, which is, how do you look at this as an opportunity? Like, who better to try to harness the power of AI and all these agents than a designer? Who better who can like, really think in a future cast and folks who can connect dots, who can walk up to a scene or a situation in a DMV or a system or wherever and be like, I can imagine a better way. And these tools should help you manifest that in a way that you weren't dependent prior, right? I don't have to have a team of 12 developers. Like, I don't have to have connection to this API. Like, there's these accelerators. I think the suggestion is the same of like, go be that young person that actually knows how to connect things and focus less on the, design thinking strategy stuff and focus more on, I'm a builder, I'm a maker. They're talking about it. Here's a POC of it actually working and sending data. And you'll get scooped in as like the helpful person who can make these things happen. So I think we have to redefine design a little bit. You're kind of a coordinator, and we learned completely different things kind of coming out of the gate. The web was new and went through so many different iterations. And I'm sure you went through some version of this where you were the person, the young, person with a lot of energy who knew how to do this complicated thing that no one figured out. So I think that's the same playbook. I would say someone who's, looking to break in.
Yeah. I mean, it's exactly the feedback. Like one of the things, so I graduated right when the recession hit. Like I like graduated college and it was like punch in the face, Drew, there's no jobs. I applied to 100 companies, didn't get a role. And it was what forced me, frankly, into freelancing and ultimately building an agency and then learning all the things that I needed to do. And what separated me in that season of my life from, the people who had the years and decades of experience was I was scrappy. I was like, I'll figure it out. I was using the new tools and technology. I was like designing with things that other people weren't, they were like, well, you design a website in Photoshop. And I'm like, why do we have to like, this doesn't make sense. Like, what if we use this new tool called Sketch? That seems like it's a smart, they're like fireworks or whatever, right? There's these, I think, waves. To your point, there's all these waves, and this is a different wave, but the like philosophy and the mindset is still the same. Like if you're willing to kind of get your hands dirty, get scrappy, like consume and learn as much as you possibly can and have that kind of growth mindset, like people will pull you into things and then you'll get the experience and then you'll be able to be that kind of manager or leader level where you're kind of orchestrating across a bunch of different stuff. And I think, frankly, it's like an unprecedented time where it is much, 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 much faster to get the information, right? Because knowledge is a commodity now. It doesn't really matter what you know. You can go to you can go to Perplexity right now or GPT and you can say, tell me everything I need to know about this topic. And it'll be like, boom, here you go. And then you can be like, take that information and you can make a video you can just watch it or make it into audio and just stream it into your brain, right? While you're sleeping at night. Like there's a lot of ways to like internalize this information that never was possible before.
I wonder if they feel like young people feel the urge to go out and like thought leader their way into a position. Cause like this, you just explained some things that the platform we're on probably does, and like all this hustle side that I've never really participated in. And because it's just like, it's such a burden. It feels like a treadmill to get on, of just like, once you start this, like I'm the source of knowledge and source of information. It feels like probably something you need to keep going. I've had people that I've worked with that have worked with me at Solemn that kind of started that, and they felt, you know, responsible for keeping it going and growing it as an audience. And I'm sure it does help, but it's just another thing that makes probably it feel hard, of like, I have to be seen as an expert before I really am an expert. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I think it's less of like being the expert and just more being willing to try things out and experiment and learn, and being aware of what's possible. Because I think, this is like a silly example, but like GPT in the last couple of weeks has released their new reasoning model, right? Which is like kind of comparable to what Perplexity can do. If you didn't know that GPT could reason, you wouldn't necessarily think to say, hey, I bet if I gave GPT these things and those things, then it could probably reason this out for me and save me about 5 hours of time versus doing it myself, right? And like, I think there's like the metaphor that I've used a couple of times now is, you remember when Amazon first came out? I don't know if you had this phenomenon happen where you go to the store, you're standing in line about to check out, and you're like, shit, I probably could have bought this on Amazon, right? Yeah. Like, that's kind of like what I think folks who are kind of coming up have the advantage of, the unfair advantage of, is they've been born and raised digital natives, right? They've been using phones since they were, infants. And so they have more comfort, freedom, flexibility in the kind of technology universe. The more aware they are of the capabilities, less about like knowing all the tools and trying to stay up to date on all the knowledge of everything. It's more about just like awareness of capabilities, so that in your head, you can solve problems faster and more efficiently than other people can, because they don't even know that those capabilities exist.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think I'm separating two things. One is like subscribe to my knowledge network, like business model pyramid scheme learning thing.
Yeah.
And then the other is like, I'm just sharing you the lessons I'm learning as I'm learning them time live. And as we're both like the old guys reflecting back, I remember doing that too. Like, there was a weird, render in the browser kind of thing that I got up and working to get this one type of like DXF file to like render in Chrome. And it was like the coolest. I thought it was cool. And they got all this weird random, Reddit traffic or something like that. So I think that is what I miss the most too. I was talking to another designer friend about, Twitter and all these communities that we've had, and how, there's so much noise everywhere, and it's hard to find that community of like people without agenda, without trying to, they're there for the community and for like sharing research versus some other ulterior motive.
Yeah. I think so. You said a really key thing, which is communities. And I think that as we think about like the future of work and the future of customer experience, I think community is such a big part of that, right? Like, as AI eats everything and, everything gets easier and faster, like, I think the people part of it is going to be the most important part, and the connection, the real human connections is the thing that like can't be replicated. And so one of the other things I've told folks is, both for like folks who are up and comers who are trying to figure out how to either get in the industry or kind of like continue to grow in the industry, it's like, you should build community, right? Like, build relationships, build connections, build networks with people. And then on the business side, a lot of folks who are listening they're business leaders, and it's like, build a community, like focus on creating close connections, real relationships with other people, because that is, I think, going to be the currency of the future. Like, relationships have always been a form of currency, like social capital, and those relationships have been such a critical component of business and design and everything. I think especially now, like, the things that are going to separate an individual or a business from anyone else is the fact that they have a community around them and they have real relationships with other people. And that's going to be what's kind of carries them beyond just, you can do things faster and easier than anybody else. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a moment for hope too. I think like some of the stuff that we talked about feels dark, like design's dead, but I think it's just a correction, like anything, right? Like a housing market reset or anything else, there's a pendulum swing here and there. And as you can see going on in government or anywhere else, like sometimes the pendulum swings too far and people go, holy crap, what are we doing? Whether it's like an ethical or regulatory or low adoption, like there's so much that CX and UX fixes that people will have to kind of return to that idea. So I think there's a lot of hope out there.
What do you think? So I know we've talked a lot about like the practice of design and like how that will look in the future and kind of what people can do to stay ahead. But let's talk more specifically about the actual experiences themselves, right? Both physical and digital. I think there's a lot of like discussion around how will AI affect it, obviously, but also communities, as we just talked about, hyper-personalization. There's a lot of these sort of things that are getting thrown around as where it'll be headed. And I think a lot of people that I talk to, they're like, I don't really know where to place my bets, right? Should I place my bets on making the digital stuff that I already have better? Should I try to build new capabilities? What should I go into the mixed reality universe? Like, what should I do? And so anyway, I'm very curious to hear your opinion on the actual experience. Like, where should people invest?
Like, if I was a business, I mean, I hate to sound like a broken record and go back to the virtual agent thing, but like, that's probably where I would go first. Yeah. And I'm just thinking a lot about these different waves that we're talking about and how they follow this like enshittification idea of, when we get to a certain point, it's all about optimize and monetize. So I don't know if I have a good answer. Like, there's so many different models out there too. There's like, I'm a small business, medium business. I'm a small professional services, like not consulting company, anti-consulting company. There's big thing companies. Like everybody's in a different space. And it feels like we're in such this moment of like contraction that like I haven't heard as much as that, other than yeah, where do people invest? Like where do I take my career? But there's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt out there, just generally. I don't really have a good answer to that. Like, where would I bet if I could like it?
I mean, here's my thought, and I don't know if you tell me if this sounds crazy, but I think you said something that is important, which is not every business is the same. Right? Like different size companies, different customer, different industry requires a different approach. And so there's not like a, sort of one size fits all for customer experience or user experience. Like you have to kind of really know your customer. But in addition to that, I think that really like the one thing that I do think is going to be important and become even more important will be like, how is your experience different than anybody else's? Right? Because with anything digital, right, the barrier to entry is getting lower and lower and lower, right? Because like one person with some AI agents can like generate an app or product and go to market, and it doesn't need a team, doesn't need capital, like can just turn it around tomorrow, right? And so because of that, like because it's faster, easier, and cheaper to do those things, like I think there's going to need to be this like elevation of the experience to the point where it's like, wow, that is so distinct and unique and different that it's memorable in people's minds. And it's not just like status quo is like, it's easy and fast. But like the thing that's going to really separate people is it's different and unique.
Yeah. I think something came to me while you were describing that, and you helped me get there. So thank you. But it also involves Rentvine and kind of this property management thing. Like people have tried to take property management like as a global national thing. And it's just so nuanced. The relationships that you have with a vendor and, in this area and how it works and what the local regulation is, it's so regional. So I think I would take I'm a manager with a team of AI, and I would go at a local problem that you can find that is more physical in nature, right? So we've all, this idea of I'm going to be a, designer, coder, or whatever, like find a physical, local kind of problem that's like has some uniqueness to it, and use those tools to tackle it. And that will get you in the race. And then it's going to get crazy with like, is Kentucky the same as Texas? And like people start, gobbling each other up with companies. But I think that's where I've been surprised how many niche products there are in this space of like physical access to your home, cleaning, dog walking, pet insurance. Like there's so many things. And I think that exists also in any kind of like, just look around your neighborhood. Pay attention to what's going on in your neighborhood, and you'll probably come up with something that is like, I bet a bunch of people in this region are kind of like seeing the same thing. So how do I use those tools to this solution? So go region.
Yeah, I think I love that. I think it's like hyper localization. It's kind of like the idea of hyper personalization, where some folks I've had on the podcast, we've talked about this notion that, true personalization is where it's like down to the person. Like Jake Heberlie lives in St. Louis, cares about these things, does this stuff, blah, blah, blah. And like when you are interacting with a company or a brand, or you're interacting with a product or service, it's like tailored to you as a human, like individually. And then to your point on like the hyper localization aspect, like humans are inherently like tribal, and community oriented, right? And like we trust, there's like the proximity, like the law of proximity, right? Of like, you trust the people that you're interacting with every day who live in your, sort of community, and you're probably going to take their recommendation or work with those people more than if it's like somebody on, 2 states over, 5 countries over, the other side of the planet. Like, you're like, well, I know John because John lives down the street, or John and I work together, or, John he's the local landscaper. And so if John launches a landscaper product that's dedicated to my neighborhood in Charlotte, North Carolina, that's serving the same size house and property that I have, I'm probably going to work with John over some massive global corporation, right? And so I think it's a good point, like betting on, like, thinking about any size company, right? Like you were talking about Rentvine, whether you're small, big, medium, whatever, if you start to think about like, how can your products and services be hyper localized, and how you go to market, the products that you create, the services that you provide, so that from a customer perspective, it's like, how did you know, right? It's just like, this is amazing. Like you're like meeting me where I'm at, truly, right? It's like a different way of thinking about scale, because for so long it's been like, how do we scale? How do we grow? And it's like, we got to think international, and we got to make this so it's repeatable across all markets. But I think it's almost like inverting that and saying, how do you start to build these things that previously were not sustainable, right? It was not scalable to have distinctly different products and experiences for every single type of market, right? But now you can actually feasibly do that, because you don't need an army of people to go deliver that. You can use an army of AI agents to deliver that, right?
Yeah, I just think there's probably some niche, like all this, it's intimidating. Like, where do I start if I was an entrepreneur? There's so many big problems, but there's a lot of little like camouflaged, nuanced, hyper local things that I think exist. So I'd love to test that out. And Drew, in like 2, 3 years, 5 years, we can have this podcast again. I'll use our virtual agents, compare St. Louis to Charlotte, and see how good we did.
Yeah. Agreed. So a couple more questions before we wrap up. So I'd love to hear if you have thoughts on like, who's doing this well. Like, who are some brands that stand out in your mind as like, they're providing a great experience, they're leveraging these new and emerging technologies to like, add things that are create value for people. Like, who's doing it well?
Yeah. This is an interesting question. So there's a lot of people talking about this stuff in a way that I think is better than I can express it. So I've been turning to kind of a lot of usual suspects like Marty Kagan and Peter Merholtz and his podcast, Finding Our Way. Audrey Crane's a designer in California. She's got a little design studio that's pretty awesome. John Cutler guy. There's a lot of cool thought leaders that I think smarter than me. So those are just like the redirects. I probably paraphrased or accidentally stole thoughts from those people. So I want to like pay it back a little bit. Leslie Witt was another one. She's like the CPO at Headspace, which is kind of like, I don't know her personally, but
it's like the meditation app, Headspace.
Yeah. So working in a cool space, but also just has gone through just been baptized by every hard thing in a large company, like sits at a very big table and earned it. So like I was inspired when I listened to her podcast. So that's somebody to look at that I think is like surviving in this chaotic time that we're all in. When I think about like specifically the vertical AI agents, there's too many to list or even think about. So I can't say that I've adopted a ton of these. There are tools I use to like accelerate my own stuff and research and all that. It's like it's built into like lots of tools. In my industry specifically, I'm watching this company called Elise AI, and they're focusing on property management and healthcare. So like those are two pretty big, meaty solutions there. When you think about how do I create a rentable agent to do my leasing or to look through like all this accounting data or scheduling stuff. And likewise on healthcare, there's like so much where data is a mess. That's probably a good bet. So I know they're doing good. But yeah, I need to get in there and test drive and do more with these tools than I probably currently am.
Yeah, from a who's doing this well standpoint, I think what's funny is like there's so many people that are experimenting right now, to kind of what you're pointing at, and it's hard to say like who's doing this like better than anyone, because like there's still not been enough time
Yeah.
passage of time to really like evaluate like success, right? Like it's kind of like too early
I
to
honestly
tell.
think whoever's gonna nail the like subscription model and onboarding to this might have a way like leg up. If it's easy to subscribe to and I can like turn my little worker bots on and off or whatever that the way I buy that, do I get a break on, the 3 month, 6 month? Do I do it transactionally like the way that like cloud servers work? I think whoever really nails that business model and then the onboarding and subscription, that's going to be an interesting place to see kind of play out.
Yeah. I'm seeing a lot of people doing consumption-based pricing too. So they'll do like, especially when it has anything to do with AI, it's like you pay a subscription and then you're paying for consumption on top of that, like tokens.
Yeah.
So I think folks who kind of figure out, that's a really good point. Like folks who figure out their business or their pricing model fastest, where it's like lowest level of friction, easiest like path to value without having to like, because a lot of, especially like SaaS universe, if you start going down the enterprise path, it gets like really complicated really fast. And you're like, I have to sign an MSA with you. I got to sign a 3-year contract. I don't really like, it's not clear to me like what, like I have this many
What
seats,
about a
but
blended service? So like those are based on compute, right? Consumption kind of equates to like how many things do I have to melt to make a request come true. But
right.
I think we'll see some maybe like hybrid solutions come out where you've kind of got some human takeover, and those might have to be priced differently, or you'll have such a solution that's so good that it's based on consumption. And I get that that's out of the gate. I think maybe people will experiment with that, or I hope they do, because I think it'd be interesting. Or
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
bundle it, like look, there's at this intersection, if I'm this type of person, back to the local idea, I need this kind of agent. I need a calendaring and like someone who can is just really good at everything calendaring and setting up things. And then I need someone who's really good at math and accounting. Okay, now I need two bots. Do I get them from the same place? Do I get them from different places? And there's going to be like kind of this middle layer thing that sits on top. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I'll take like a interesting angle to this, like who's doing it well. I have been connecting with a lot of fractional people, like basically solopreneur people who are like they are a team of one, but they're providing value to these bigger companies by using all the tools, right? They're kind of like an Iron Man, right, level or Batman level individual. And I think that's what, like, I also think that kind of is indicative of like the future of how work will get done, particularly in knowledge work universe. You're going to have like a team of 1 or 5 that are going to be like able to do a lot more with a lot less. But yeah, it's really interesting. Like talking to fractional people, the ones that are really doing this well, like they're constantly experimenting. They're able to like start to use agents to kind of do almost like, instead of having a team of like junior level talent that they're kind of delegating to, they're just delegating it to agents.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think in the sort of mid-size, mid-market, and enterprise companies, if folks start to kind of take that philosophy of like what a fractional person is doing, like a good fractional person is doing, and saying, hey, what are the tools that you can kind of put in your tool belt so that you and the rest of your team are doing like 10x more with your time than not? Because frankly, I think people who are afraid of losing their jobs, like you're probably going to lose your job to the one person who just has like 50 tools that they're pulling from in their belt, right? Like, and they're throwing batarangs and like shooting their like their whatever propeller gun thing, to like pull them up to the top of the building. Like that's the person you got to watch out for. And I think there's a bit of a kind of the glass half full, glass half empty is that person could take your job. And if you take the same playbook from that person and you apply it in these bigger companies, you actually will do just fine, right? So anyways, I'd love to, so last question before we wrap up. What are some, like, we've covered a lot of ground. This has been a great conversation, but like, what are some specific tactical tips and tricks or things that people should be, taking away from this conversation and can implement like today?
Yeah, I think it's I mean, we've covered most of it, but it's the tinkering or get to POC level. So push past your comfort zone of what you think you can do. And I guess like that seems like a lonely kind of thing. Like that, I don't know about you, but like if I have a side hustle, side project, which I haven't talked about, but I have plenty of those. That's the one thing that'll stall out is if I don't have somebody there to commit with me or to be held accountable to. So whether that's like a friend or back to community of working with other people. Maybe this is like more of a partnership thing, because I'll go down on a project and I'll be making progress, but I'll lose steam. So I'd say like make your ideas real enough to where you can have a demoable POC. You're going to like know how to do some of it and you're going to have to push through other stuff, but then augment that with community and people that, I got this from ChatGPT. I'm still stuck in this one part. So I feel like balancing that will get you to the finish line, hopefully. It's kind of generic, but I mean, yeah, I think that's what I would say is like get to some simple project and finish it out and build that experience.
Yeah. I mean, like the experimentation mindset, right? Like, don't be afraid to try things out. And, what's I think pretty phenomenal about the era that we're in right now is you could take something, make a quick experiment in 5 minutes. And then if it doesn't work, you've only invested 5 minutes, right? Yeah. Like, this is just like a funny little example, but the other day I was trying to come up with a faster way to do pricing models for StealthX. And my wife was like, why don't you just build like a thing using Lovable and just make like a pricing tool or whatever? And I was like, wow, that's a really good idea. I should definitely do that. So I'm like sitting on the couch, we're watching Severance and I'm like typing on my phone and I'm like, make a pricing thing. And I gave it some, details.
He's working while his Audie's out there, like, or something.
That's right. My Annie is like working away on this pricing model on my Audie's enjoying Severance. But anyway, it was like, I think it's like having the quick response, quick reaction, try an experiment quickly versus like, well, I need to go and do this and then I have to do that. Like all the sort of like, I don't know, the baggage that we have had to do in years past, like all of that is gone. Like you don't need to carry that anymore,
I guess another thing too would be like, if that didn't work out, like the second part, like write about it. Cause I think if you want some, like you'll get experience internally and that's going to help you. But if you write about it, it'll create some sort of awareness or credibility, like, wow, this person's actually doing the things everyone else is just talking about. So I think, having the courage to share, show and tell, but also if it fails or you get to a point where you decide to shutter it, like that's okay too. I mean, there's a million ideas out there and it doesn't have to be an app in the app store or some final thing. Along the way, you'll probably pivot or you'll shut down, but you will learn some stuff. So I think taking that, recognizing that as a win, super healthy thing.
Yeah, the storytelling, it's a really important, honestly, thing. Like everybody's just generating words. Like there's so much noise right now. But to your point, the people who are actually like providing real, value to the rest of the universe is like the people who are like, hey, I tried this. It didn't work too great. Try this other thing. It did a little bit better. Here's my, like you're building in public, building in the open, showing the process. And I think people are much more appreciative more than ever of an authentic kind of communication, authentic storytelling. Like talk about the good, the bad, the ugly. Don't feel like you got to pretty it up. There's enough polished, pretty things on the internet right now that don't tell the real deal. And then, if you are transparent and authentic, one, you're learning as you're doing it, to your point. But two, you're also like building a community and an audience of people who are like, wow, this person's actually really solid. I want to continue to listen to what they're saying. I want to continue to collaborate with this person, right? You'll kind of become a magnet of people who are like that, right?
Yeah. There's so much of the other manufactured junk out there, crap, that like, I wish it could boost the signal of that like authentic maker that's out there in the internet. I feel like we had it 10, 15 years ago, and now it's been overtaken by engagement hacks. Yeah, this is a call to arms, call to action. Go out there, boost that authentic maker stuff, and Drew and I will come like your posts.
Yeah, that's right. Well, cool, Jake. Thank you so much for being on the show, man. Where can folks find you online?
This is gonna cut so bad. LinkedIn. After I've bashed it a few times, I don't have like the heavy presence. So find me on LinkedIn. We can share stuff, and that's where I'm at these days.
Cool. And folks, you can find me online at drewburdick.com. Pretty much every social network as well. Jake, man, awesome conversation as always. I hope you have an awesome day.
Thanks, Drew. It's fun.
Like, comment, and subscribe.